Probably like super important as well, given the size of these tunnels. I think we looked at it was like an 8.5 meter bore tunnel,
Massive.
which is
Yeah.
for anyone that's like, if we use the London Underground example, if you've been on one of the old ones where you can feel like you can't like swing a cat in that tunnel. This is a
Well,
big gear.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. 8 meter diameter is massive.
Welcome back to the Offsite podcast. I am Jason Lancini and I'm joined once again by Carlos Cavallo. Today we have like three super interesting things that we're going to talk about driven by recent news. So first thing, we're going to kick off a conversation about, let's say, the like lesser known French metro project underway in Toulouse, the Line C expansion. There's a bunch of interesting things to look at in terms of how that's being built. Next, we're going to circle around to the recent and unfortunate news of Autodesk, construction design giant, laying off 1,350 employees as part of a restructuring effort. So if you've been on LinkedIn at any point in the last week or two, you would have seen this news. And then finally, we're going to, on the topic of LinkedIn, we're gonna look at a post that was put up recently, which asked the question of whether the majority of construction contractors using the same software offers any real competitive advantage vis-a-vis, is software worth anything at all if everyone's using it? So some spicy content there. Carlos, how are you?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks. Pretty good. I did some deep engineering research this week, which I'm sure will impress you. But I don't know if you caught the news recently, but there's an organization that has invented, they call it sugarcrete, and it's basically making blocks to build houses. I think they did a test run in India using the byproduct of sugar production, which is something called pith, which I had actually never heard of before. And it's basically useless. Digging into it slightly, there's like hundreds of millions of metric tons of this stuff being produced and thrown away each year. And now they're able to build homes from it. So quite interesting to be able to build houses out of the byproduct of sugar.
Double click. So first of all, you did say, I did a bunch of engineering research and then went straight into your sugar concrete.
Yeah. The others are about TBMs. So it's not all sugar.
No, apart from the fact that does sound like people are building houses out of those tiny little cubes that you get when you go to like a fancy restaurant to go into your tea. As a great grandson of sugarcane farmers, I can vouch that there is a lot of like waste stuff that does get generated that isn't let's say, sugar. And there are elements of it which traditionally were just burnt, which isn't so good for the environment.
Yeah, for sure.
So using it to build some houses. Yeah.
Why not,
cool. Yeah, why not? Cool. All right, let's go straight in off the bat. So we last week talked at length about the Paris Metro project, and a lot of the research there like led us to look at the Toulouse Metro project as well. And there were a bunch of things about it that were just really intriguing and interesting. So to give some context and background before we kind of dive into some of the more engineering construction elements of interest. For those that don't know, it is Toulouse's third metro line expansion. In terms of scale, it's a 27-kilometer long line that kind of runs, I'm so bad at like northwest, east, south.
Northwest to southeast.
It runs from like the west, cuts across, and then like hooks around through kind of like the center of town, and then kind of like out to the southeast. I think I got that right. So it's got 21 stations. It started way back in 2022. It started a few years ago in 2022, due to open in 2028. A relatively modest budget given the scope of 3.4 billion euros. And it really has only a couple of interactions with the existing metro system in terms of interchanges, but largely a brand new station, a line with these 21 new stations. So it is like quite an interesting project, and I guess, Carlos, with your QS hat on, you would have been immediately intrigued at the cost to scope ratio here.
And the relatively short timeline. I think it's everything in 8 years.
Yeah, definitely. Well, definitely, for sure. And it's also, so of the scope itself, there's, of the 27 kilometers, about 22 kilometers is underground tunneled sections. In that section, there were, I think, 5 TBMs planned for the construction scope. And currently, today, as we speak, there are, I think, 3 currently operational. I think they're supposed to break through in late 2025. In terms of, we talked last week in Paris Metro, the depth of some of the stations. These stations aren't as deep, but there are 17 stations on that 22-kilometer underground section. There are 17 underground stations being built in this scope, which, again, is no mean feat. And then there is a 5-kilometer elevated section that is running through a viaduct. And on that section, there are 4 elevator stations on the viaduct. So it's like definitely a mixed scope of both tunneled and underground stations with boxes and elevated viaduct. A bunch of things to double click into here. Anything that was like the most interesting for you?
Yeah, so the tunneling itself, so I think it was like 80% is underground out of the 27 kilometers. But I had a little nerd out on the TBMs being used. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you've heard of variable density tunnel boring machines before. But
so I think they're the ones that, like, the density is like it varies kind of along the way.
Yeah. Moving on to the next topic. So a bit of backstory, because if you're like me, you don't know that much about tunnel boring machines, but a massive part to play, obviously, is the ground conditions that you're actually operating in. Anything from like quite a tough clay to something very soft like sand. And this stretch is quite varied along the route, and they're using these what they call variable density TBMs, which are only used on a few projects in the world. And they've kind of got these different modes based on the ground that you're in. They have something called this earth pressure balance mode. So they're actually using the ground that they're excavating to apply pressure to the front to make sure that everything is sort of staying tight as you move. Mm-hmm. And then there's a bit of technology that uses I just forgotten the word for it, a screw conveyor, like a piling machine, to pull this soil out at the rate that it should to maintain the pressure.
To maintain pressure, yeah.
Whereas it also has something they call it this mixed shield mode, where they're pulling in like a bentonite, which is like a kind of dense slurry you might see for things like D-walls, to maintain the pressure, because it's like maybe a softer material that they can't actually use to maintain the pressure on the face of the TBM. So yeah, there's different modes based on the type of materials that you're in without having to switch out the TBM or do anything. It's like a mechanical shift in how it operates.
Probably like super important as well, given the size of these tunnels. I think we looked at it was like an 8.5 meter bore tunnel.
Massive.
Which is for anyone that's like, if we use the London Underground example, if you've been on one of the old ones where you can feel like you can't like swing a cat in that tunnel. This is a big gear.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, 8 meter diameter is massive.
Yeah, massive. So yeah, it's a sizable bit of kit. Again, makes the like cost of it seem really good value. The thing that was interesting to me was the viaduct section, and the reason was that I'd gone quite deep on a project. So in Perth, in Western Australia, at the moment, there's a major infrastructure project, the biggest in the state's history, called MetroNet. And they're building a whole bunch of new train lines. And one of the sections of the project involves an 18-month shutdown of an active rail line and the ripping out of that rail line and effectively building a 5-kilometer elevated viaduct that facilitates the removal of level crossings along that route. So the goal is like removing level crossings, which is why they're elevating the rail route. What's interesting is it's like a very similar scope, overall length, etc. That project they've managed to go woe to go in like under 18 months, doing a similar scope of elevated viaduct. And one of the things that they did was took like a bunch of cues of like offsite manufacturing, prefab, focusing on kind of like a kit of parts and Lego, the idea of like giant Lego pieces, maybe not having the optimized design element for each specific scenario, but having it so that they're all the same. And it has proved that the team there on that section of the project has, proved to do amazing things when like the simplicity of what's being put together is like maximized. Kind of relates to some of the things we were talking about around learning curves and stuff like that from a few weeks ago with regards to Hinkley Point C. So it'd be interesting to see if similar learnings are taken forward. And I don't know if they kind of cross the world to France in the same kind of time frame, but I'd be particularly interested to see how this viaduct section gets built and how long it takes.
Yeah, it's quite a substantial. I think it's a 5 kilometer section on the.
It's exact same length. Yeah, it's exactly the same length as the MetroNet one.
Putting your I'm a huge concrete nerd hat on. Some of the spans are 40 meters. Is that quite substantial for a viaduct?
The train itself, the actual rail, I'm guessing, I haven't double checked, but I'm guessing the trains aren't super long.
You could guess that really from the price, because if you're building major stations underground, you're not doing 21 stations. Yeah. So yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm guessing that they're not very long, which is why the boxes are probably smaller and why the price is lower, as you said. So I'm guessing they're fairly lightweight. 40 meters is very long if you were talking road traffic and that sort of thing on a bridge. I think it's doable. I don't know if it's post-tensioned or pre-stressed or anything, but no, 40 meters doable.
Yeah. Okay.
And I've got no concrete nerd facts to add to
that. Yeah. I'm imagining something closer to the DLR here in terms of trains, relatively lightweight, not 1,500 people. Yep.
You want to maximize the span because obviously
it's over residential areas, so
the more piers you have, the less usable the space underneath becomes. Yeah, so super interesting project. The other thing that we should loop back to at a future conversation with this project is the way that they've broken up the contracts. There was an interesting thing that we didn't cover last week from Paris Metro, where one of the learnings from a prior section of Paris Metro project was that they had in a prior set of contracts awarded lots of smaller contracts. And then in the most recent section, there was kind of a government learning paper that was you're better off basically letting a smaller number of very big contracts.
Is that for the learnings and the repeated delivery?
No, actually, it was just we don't want to manage the interfaces is kind of the...
Well, the cost of interface is huge, right?
Yeah. I think it's worth actually double clicking on this in a future conversation because I have a view that the interface doesn't go away. You're just getting someone else to manage it. So I'm thinking of writing something about this.
It doesn't go away. Oh, this is a conversation for another time. But it's a claims thing, isn't it? In terms of cost.
Yeah. But the complexity is still there. So even though you don't see it in claims or whatever, I think it gets priced into the contract value.
100%.
So I think
there's too much overlap.
I'm going to write something about this on LinkedIn, but we should definitely circle back to it. But it's interesting that on this project they have it's a couple of basically it's a handful of big contracts as well. It doesn't have the same degree of complexity.
Nice triggering post on LinkedIn incoming.
I think there's a sweet spot as well. I'm stuck on this topic now, but I think there's a sweet spot because too many interfaces. I think there's a lot of learning. We'll circle back to this. Stay tuned.
I wonder if some could check.
We're trying to get off the topic and we can't.
No, one final comment is when you slice and dice a contract into subcontract packages, I'm not aware of commercial procurement teams thinking about slicing it based on interfaces. They slice it based on the type of works they're delivering. That'd be quite interesting.
Yeah. They you just put the line in the contract that says you shall coordinate your works with other contractors. And then it's the problem's actually solved. So that's fine.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's that's a topic for a future episode for sure. So it's a super interesting project. Very keen to see how it progresses, works ongoing till 2027, 2028. So again, anyone listening that wants a chance to move to France, cool project. Okay, so Autodesk. Everywhere on LinkedIn has been recruiters talking about, mainly recruiters, but sometimes employees of Autodesk talking about a large scale layoff that the company recently announced. 1,350 employees, approximately 9% of the workforce was announced to be laid off. It is reported to be primarily focusing on sales, marketing, and admin roles across the business, so not on a specific division. Limited on any R&D teams. They have specifically said they're like doubling and trebling down in AI, cloud, and core software. Although announcements seem to like try to say otherwise, one of the underlying factors here is that the company itself has a activist investor shareholder, Starboard Value, who has been agitating for removing cost from the business. Even though everyone says it's got nothing to do with that, that probably has something to do with it. I'd be interested to think, Carlos, what do you think this means for Autodesk around their strategy, around what they're seeing in the marketplace, and what's going on under the hood here?
Obviously, there's various articles and interviews and things floating around. So trying to piece that together, you get a sense, and there's like some direct information around this transition towards cloud, this transition towards AI, the narrative that we're seeing with most of these companies at the moment. They're going through this. I think they're in a bit of protection mode. Autodesk has always been the only vendor in the design software space. Like it's been not only the first name, but pretty much the only name on the list in a significant way for a long time. So in transitioning to cloud and what sounds like trying to push sales, marketing, and other aspects, reduce the cost to optimize their delivery and obviously increase revenue and build in AI, feels like a play to stay relevant in the market, compete with startups in a very congested space, because they're not the only name in the bucket anymore. And not just Bentley, there's a lot of new startups kind of trying to compete in the space. So I think they're bootstrapping, shifting towards cloud and AI to try and hold on to this market position that they have as the leader. And obviously they're trying to tie in contractors into long-term agreements to protect their foothold and secure revenue.
And when you say startups, it's probably worth noting that in the behind the scenes here, there's also some specific names. So interestingly, the former CEO of Autodesk has recently announced a $46 million funding round for a somewhat competitive product called Motive that had been in stealth mode for some period of time. We talked about Amar and his like 12 rules for building software in the past. I think to put another way, are you saying they're in like panic mode?
I think to an extent. I think a company that is that big, been in the game for that long, the market's shifting. And when you introduce AI, the rate of change is accelerated so fast that it will cause these organizations to panic. It's not like these incremental changes over long periods of time. Things are changing quite quickly. Yeah, I would guess that there's a bit of a panic internally, and this is shields up, protection mode, keep our customers, secure our customers into long-term agreements, and move into the space that you see as the future in a quicker way.
The thing that I took away that was really interesting is that this does point to a lot of the news and what they've announced points to a kind of like a tech-forward self-serve buying model, and a lot of the reduction in people away from like a sales-led approach.
And a huge reseller market too.
Yeah. So and this is like interestingly consistent with Innate recently announced this like 2 days ago. We're recording this on the 6th of March. 2 days ago, or even a day ago, Innate announced that they're doing a like self-serve purchasing approach. What's interesting is the legacy players in this space like Autodesk and Innate have had a sales-led, reseller, partner-led selling approach since inception. That has a kind of let's call it like let's go hard. It has like a vicious cycle of what it means, which is like you end up with like a complex you get like a complex sale process that needs like large teams of salespeople to navigate the process. The large teams has like a high cost to the business that they have to fund. Then the high cost basically means that it becomes expensive software. And that the way that you sell has to kind of optimize towards maximizing value extraction from your customer. So you end up with these large sales teams that result in the need for the whole business to kind of make sense, to maximize the price, maximize value extraction from their customer. And the way that you maximize that is through a complex sales process where you don't show pricing. You go through this kind of like value discovery process and you maximize for value extraction, which then like feeds on itself. And so the idea of just showing people what the price is, letting people buy it, letting people try it, is obviously that's like where a lot of the rest of the world is in terms of modern software today. But that's like a full 180 on the way a business operates. So I don't think it's like something you can just like dip your toe into. If your go-to-market approach is kind of like, I don't know, what's the best analogy? It's like the legs of a company. So they're doing like a legs transplant of the company. Like it's not a small thing, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting though, because I sort of described their core products as this thing that's been around for a long time. But that's actually really advantageous if you want to shift to like direct billing and like onboarding, things like that, because the hardest thing about selling and onboarding new software is like the list of unknowns to the customer. The best, if they can just transition their tools all to cloud, direct billings or selling is really easy because it's AutoCAD. You don't need, the market understands the tool, and there's huge internal teams of contractors that will run internal training and everyone, it's built into the ecosystem. So they can nail the direct billing, reduce that cost. There isn't this huge education piece that comes with it. And then they can just upsell and uplift features and aspects to that core thing that's already been sold in a relatively sort of automated way.
Yeah, what was interesting to me is I did some research into the split of like where revenue comes from inside Autodesk, because I went into the thought process like I think you're kind of alluding to, that like AutoCAD's the majority of the business.
Yeah, and that and Revit, I think.
It's
the
not.
Names you always know.
Unless, and I triple check these numbers, so I welcome anyone that thinks these are incorrect to correct me. The numbers that I pulled shows that AutoCAD revenue is about 1.5 billion in 2024, which is 23% of total revenue, and it's growing at 8% year on year. And the AECO, which includes construction, architecture, engineering, which is not which. Build and the ACC, Autodesk Construction Cloud product, that is at 3.2 billion. So it's 40% of revenue.
Wow.
And that's growing at 15% year on year.
The interesting thing you said about AutoCAD growing 8% a year is I've heard 8% as a number bounced a couple of times recently, which is the inflationary clause in some major software vendors' contracts. So I wonder if it's even growing. It's just the price is going up.
No, I thought you were going to say something even different. I thought you were going to say it's growing 8% year on year, but prices are going up 15% or something. You know, like
no, they are. Like that's the specific number I've heard. So I wonder if they're just flat on licenses and it's just inflation.
Well, that would make sense. That like the marketplace of startups trying to eat some of that pie is like enormous. There's like a new one every 2 days. It feels like.
Yeah.
So there must be. It must be. And that must be what is driving part of this response. But this is like, if the model is like changing the go-to-market strategy across the business, that is like a 20-something, I don't know how old the company is, I'm guessing. Like, yeah, I would love a better analogy than a legs transplant, but it feels like a legs transplant. I don't know if anyone's successfully pulled off a legs transplant, but it feels like a bold strategy.
Bold strategy indeed. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how things move. Obviously, awful for the 1,300 people being laid off, but I guess the strategy will emerge over time because we should see an actual shift in what they're doing. It'll be complicated for contractors because they're losing that enterprise negotiation with the sales individuals and being fixed into cost. You would imagine that's.
I think that'll still exist.
Difficult.
I think that they'll probably just keep that for the biggest of customers. I would say would be my guess. I can't imagine they're going to get rid of that piece.
Yeah,
but that's pure speculation and guessing.
Yeah, we'll see.
I wonder if it spawns a whole industry of spite businesses. If you're a Curb Your Enthusiasm fan, people being laid off and then going and joining the like I want to kill Autodesk startup.
Yeah.
So that's a Curb Your Enthusiasm reference. I won't explain it. It is funny if I don't. Right, let's jump to third topic. So a somewhat provocative post on LinkedIn got our attention and got us talking. And I'm not saying that this will become a regular segment of the podcast, but the idea of like things people say on LinkedIn as a topic is interesting. So I'll briefly kind of like summarize the gist of the post, and I might quote from it at times. But the post basically said, do you want to make a construction tech company sweat? If you do, ask them this question. How does making every contractor work exactly the same way protect what makes us unique and competitive? And the gist of it, basically, if I was to play it back, is if you're selling me competitive advantage or some advantage over my competitors, and the goal is that basically you'll sell this software to all of those competitors, how does it result in any competitive advantage? And just do we all end up doing the same thing and paying kind of like a tax? I'm happy to argue either side. I have a clear preference. I am somewhat biased, but obviously there's what I think is a clearly right and wrong answer. But I'm happy to argue either side, Carlos. If you want to play out the kind of like steel man, straw man.
I can't get on board with the idea that you buy software for competitive advantage. You're buying software to stay in the game, and sometimes you're going to be first to do something that makes you slightly better. Like to put another odd analogy, probably less odd than replacing legs, but like Formula One, the cars are almost exactly all the same. You haven't got massive varied designs. Over time, the latest technology comes out, they all embrace it, and each season someone's incrementally better because they pulled something new or found another way of doing something. So you need software to stay in the game. I get that if everyone is
haven't you just described getting competitive advantage?
yeah, but in a nice simple way. You need, obviously, I understand the concept that if we have this level playing field of ever using the same software, then the market becomes more competitive and margin will be reduced because like it's expectation. There's no one that's drastically far ahead, but you have to keep that software to stay in the game. So saying that, oh, we're not going to buy the software because it doesn't help us win work is an odd one, because if you don't do it, you're not going to be able to effectively manage that part of the business in a way that keeps you up with everyone else. So there will be exceptions to the rule, but broadly, I don't think it's around competitive advantage. It's around efficiency and productivity.
Maybe if you redefine competitive advantage, because maybe you're thinking about it in the sense of like we're bidding at work and we're competing on the bid of the work. If you
I'm thinking competitive in the market.
I think if you broadly redefine competitive advantage of like, even if this piece of software helps us make more profit, even if we don't win any more work, it makes us more efficient or more profit. That's more profit that we can use to invest in some other thing that makes us more competitive. So like, I think even if you more broadly define it in that sense.
But if we're being more broad, it's still the same point. If you're using the same tool as another organization to produce the same efficiencies, which is making you competitive from a revenue sense, it's not a negative thing that everyone else is doing it. If we're removing the whole competitive in the market, this is just internally. Yeah. Contractors making money. I'm not sure why you're going to be pissed that the next guy along is doing the same thing and also making a margin from it.
Yeah.
This is kind of this, I don't know what the right phrase is, but it's an odd thing to sort of play at.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's like it's like somewhat of a argument. But yeah, let's imagine like you and I are construction or design. Let's take an example of designers, right? Just to call back to the prior topic of AutoCAD, right? You're designing with pencils and paper and drafting and draft rules and slide rules, etc. And I've got AutoCAD. Presuming someone knows how to use the AutoCAD on my team, I'd be faster at drafting than you and doing revisions, etc. And so that should result in like I could either have more margin or I could underbid you theoretically on jobs, which means I do have a competitive advantage over you in terms of like winning work and also just the amount of margin I can make. At some point, you would probably adopt AutoCAD. At which point I'm in a spot where I have no more competitive advantage as a result of the AutoCAD purchase. But if I was to therefore go get rid of AutoCAD, then that's a dumb, like I'm basically ceding competitive advantage to you. So I think the flip side of the argument is also true. Like even if your competitors adopt it, unadopting it or getting rid of it is ceding the competitive advantage. I think the idea of like technological advancement and productivity advancements across the economy and world as a whole is like these incremental waves that stack on top of each other. I think with any like innovation or technological advancement, the people that adopt it first get some marginal advantage, which as other people start to copy and do the same diminishes. And ultimately you're left with maybe a technology vendor or a software vendor that is basically getting some revenue share of the benefit that they've given everyone. You know, AutoCAD is making some benefit that might be measurable on the process or economy as a whole, and they're maybe value extracting some percentage of that. And then the goal is either for the technology vendor or to use some of that money that it's making, or for the company that had the competitive advantage temporarily, that had a margin advantage or a profit advantage, to keep reinvesting that in the next advancement. Like it's a continual cycle that isn't just like adopt this piece of software and you'll win forever.
Yeah. The post was particularly triggering because it's almost implying that if you're working the same way as someone else, even if it's the best in class, should you be doing that because you're not then competitive? Like sometimes there's not another option for each class of tool or whatever we're looking at. So
and just because I was racing you in Formula One, just because you have the same car doesn't mean I'll ditch the car and go back to the horse sort of thing. Like it's
old strategy.
At some point it does become a tax, but it's a tax in exchange for productivity improvement.
Yeah.
So I think it's it's a pretty cynical, narrow view on what technological advancement actually looks like. And I did say I was biased. But no, interesting. I think what do you reckon? Do we bring out the what did someone say on LinkedIn this week segment?
Yeah, it's always nice to vent and mock someone, but also point out a good post. So let's see what we get next week.
Okay, that went in a direction. This was not a mocking thing.
But it is. Yeah, not mocking.
But you did say literally the word mocking. Can we bleep out the word mocking?
Not specifically this post, but in the future, I am up for mocking when appropriate.
Okay. Selective mocking.
That's it.
Discussing, and then in brackets, selectively mocking LinkedIn posts. That's the name of the segment. We'll work on
100%. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that was super interesting. I think all topics, even Autodesk and the Toulouse Metro, I think super interesting. So do you want to read us out?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning into today's show. If you did enjoy today's episode, please do think about liking this video or following us on your chosen podcast platform. We really appreciate your support, and we'll catch you all next week.
Bye-bye.